overnight, but there are many stumbling blocks. Among them, how to transfer technology from industrialized countries and the developing countries' need for financial help to implement Agenda 21.
The matter of financial resources will be the cornerstone of Agenda 21. For the developing countries, the attainment of a reasonably high standard of living is a target that cannot be compromised.
We cannot save the environment if the rich refuse to provide greater aid to the poor and are also reluctant to improve the terms of trade.
Africa's external debt is the single most important factor inhibiting our developmental efforts.
The bulk of developing countries' incremental investment needs for environmental purposes must come from savings that they can achieve through improved economic policies, from private sector sources, and from improved trade. But good economic policies and greater trade alone are not enough. Substantially increased aid flows are crucial if the low-income countries are to meet their national environmental needs. We have proposed an Earth increment for IDA, the bank's concessional lending arm, to help the poorest countries meet their environmental objectives.
The need for women to play a central role in sustainable development is strongly felt at the Global Forum and the Earth Summit.
We must propose new efforts to improve education and literacy, especially among women, in order to empower women to make decisions about their future, about their lives, and about their families.
Increasing options for women is the key to sustainable development for everyone. Their full participation in society is essential, for example, if population increase is to be contained.
Equity will only be achieved when women in developing countries and their counterparts in the North have the same access to family planning services.
What the Church opposes is the imposition of demographic policies and the promotion of methods for limiting births which are contrary to the objective moral order.
Below the outstretched arms of the monumental Christ the Redeemer on Rio's world-famous Corcovado, leaders of the world's major religions join hands in prayer for the Earth and for the success of the Earth Summit.
We can do anything which we want. We can control the whole planet. I think this is a wrong conception. After all, we are as a part of the nature. So if you see nature, you see balance, you see dramatically you see change, I think entire humanity will suffer.
Peace and harmony, however, are not always evident at Rio Centro. Some groups are angered by the unwillingness of the United States to sign the Biodiversity Convention, which aims at preserving all life forms.
We're simply discussing the fact that everyone in the United States, particularly youth in the United States, are not happy with the policies of the administration today.
Back up, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get hurt.
The U.S. believes the convention insufficiently protects owners of patents. It's also concerned about how technology transfer to developing countries is to be financed.
We would have hoped that the negotiations leading up to the Biodiversity Convention would have confined themselves to issues of protecting flora and fauna. If they had done that, we would have enthusiastically signed this convention. They did not do that. They addressed issues of patents and intellectual property rights.
This convention is for the conservation and protection of our biological diversity and not for the protection of intellectual property rights. We concur that intellectual property rights are a constraint to technology transfer, and the purpose of the convention is to deal with it as such.
The transfer of environmentally sound technology will promote the harnessing of the enormous biodiversity of the South to the mutual advantage of both the developed and the developing countries.
Indigenous people from all over the world come to Rio to emphasize that their traditional ways of life support and sustain the planet. They hold a conference in Carioca village, outside of Rio, to assert their rights. For them and for many others, a major concern is the future of forests.
Just 2 days ago, President Bush announced an ambitious initiative to fund forest conservation in developing countries. This initiative aims at no less than doubling assistance to developing countries for forest conservation and sustainable use.
The leaders of indigenous groups take their case to Rio Centro itself. They call for binding commitments to limit the unsustainable commercial encroachment that is literally destroying the ecosystem they inhabit.
That translates into 51 million trees per day.
Industrialized nations cut down many of their forests long ago. Now they see the world's dwindling timber resources as vital habitats for valuable species and as a carbon sink to absorb greenhouse gases. By contrast, the countries of the South wish to continue using their forest resources for much-needed development.
We wish to underline the supremacy of our sovereignty over our forests. We are certainly not holding them in custody for those who have destroyed their own forests and now try to claim ours as part of the heritage of mankind.
Where words are inadequate, art takes over. The creative contribution of many artists is evident throughout Rio. A French theater company acts out the greatest of all menaces to our planet, war. The streets of Rio and the Global Forum become an ecological world fair. Just about anyone can air their hopes and dreams of saving the planet.
Okay, fine. What we have here is a solar box cooker, and it's designed to cook by using solar energy entirely. It's a way of cutting down on deforestation and using a type of energy that's available to everybody.
Advocacy groups dramatize the issues. Concern about the use of nuclear energy, the dangers of toxic waste disposal, the need for clean and renewable energy sources. Events staged to underline public concern about air pollution and global warming. It is not just the protesters who point to the high levels of oil and coal consumption. It is also an issue among official delegates.
20% of the world population are consuming 80% of its resources and are also responsible for the 75% of the emissions that pollute the atmosphere.
Global warming resulting from proliferation of greenhouse gases may lead to glacial melting, water expansion, and sea level rise, leading to dire consequences for Pacific Islands.
The sea level rise could annihilate the Marshall Islands as effectively as a nuclear bomb.
In an effort to prevent drastic and irreversible changes in global weather patterns, the Convention on Climate Change seeks to reduce levels of the greenhouse gases that contribute to atmospheric warming.
Switzerland wishes to reaffirm its determination announced 2 years ago to stabilize its emissions of CO2 by the year 2000 to the level of 1990 and to reduce its emissions after the year 2000.
Some countries, however, see timetables as unrealistic, with little planning to back them up.
Why are the United States afraid of such a small country to declare its own reduction of carbon dioxide?
We would be delighted to have Switzerland declare it. That's never really been a problem. We hope at the time that Switzerland declares it, it would also be kind enough to tell us precisely how it intends to do it, which is what the Global Climate Change Convention sets up as a process.
There's been reports that the U.S. government has been putting pressure on the governments of Austria, Switzerland, and the Netherlands not to put together an agreement outside of the climate convention that would commit them and perhaps some other European nations to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by the year 2000 at 1990 levels.
No, the United States never puts pressure on anybody. This is clearly a canard. However, we continue to think that the notion of setting targets and timetables really does put the cart before the horse in this exercise, that there is a fundamental need to determine specific and precise actions that people are going to take to improve the quality of air and CO2 emissions.
The Framework Convention is finalized.